The French police have done their best to find reasons as to why Nathi Mthethwa would take his life, but the answers may not be in the French capital.
Is if this whole thing of investigation can really be hastened.
South African authorities are also doing their fair share of investigations in the late diplomat's home country, and what they found in Nathi Mthethwa's house has left everyone shocked. In late September, South African ambassador to France, Nathi Mthethwa, was in Paris for a diplomatic assignment. He had lodged in the four-star hotel, the Hyatt Regency. He was going to be there well into October. On his to-do list while in Paris, he had a cocktail party to attend. His wife, Feliciwe Buthelezi Mthethwa, was also in Paris, but they had traveled separately as her husband traveled with his diplomatic team, given that he was in France for official reasons. The cocktail party was where the two of them were supposed to meet. It was held on the 29th of September and featured many French and African politicians and diplomats, and the event would have felt empty without the presence of Nathi Mthethwa. He was more than just an ambassador. He was the former police minister and the arts and culture minister, but his roots as a South African politician run way deeper. Before he was ever a minister, he was a top member of the African National Congress. He was an African juggernaut when it came to regional politics. He was bound to be the center of attention at the cocktail party. But here's the problem. He wasn't there. The first person to notice was his wife. The moment she got to the venue of the event and couldn't reach her husband, the next people she informed about this was the French police. Even they were shocked about what they just learnt. A top African diplomat was missing in the most populated city in France. Not only was it going to be a very difficult task finding him, but it was very hard to believe that this wasn't just some terrible nightmare. Even his team weren't aware of his whereabouts, so this meant that he wasn't at a confidential meeting of any sort. He was actually missing. But the search for Nathi Mthethwa wouldn't even take up to 24 hours. Security staff of the Hyatt Regency found his body that morning, ending a frantic search that began just hours before. He was in the courtyard and officers found him just a few minutes before noon. This would have been good news if the diplomat was still alive. He was found dead on the spot, and it appeared that it was as a result of trauma from falling over 20 stories high. And considering that his hotel room was on the 22nd floor, it was obvious that he had jumped from the window. Maybe it was an accident. Maybe the diplomat was at another party and got so intoxicated he had to retreat to his hotel room. And there he might have been alone and in the struggle to find his way around and accidentally fell through the window and 21 floors down to his death. But this couldn't possibly have happened because the hotel windows aren't designed to open easily. And although Mthethwa's hotel window was open, it was only so because it was pried open by scissors, which were found in his room after his body was discovered. This means that he wasn't intoxicated and he deliberately broke the window open and jumped to his demise. But the problem is, what reason did Mthethwa have to take his life? Well, the only person that had remote ideas as to why this could even be possible was the closest person to him, his wife, no-turned widow. Feliciwe Buthelezi Mthethwa revealed after his death that she had received text messages from her husband prior to the cocktail party that he was sorry and was contemplating. But here's what makes these messages to his wife strange. He was in contact with his uncle during the same time, and his messages contradict those of Feliciwe's. Mthethwa's uncle Musa Wokufila had no idea that his nephew had tendencies. They were frequently communicating, and he never for once gave any signs that he was mentally troubled. Rather, his words showed that he was as good as ever. So, hearing of his passing not only broke his heart, but it just didn't make any sense. In an interview he said, "Nathi loved his family. He used to call all of us just to check on how we were doing. He never said anything about problems at work or in his personal life. That's why we are shocked by his death. His death does not make sense. It left us with pain and confusion. How could his phone be found so far from his body? Was it or something else? We need answers." As far as French intelligence goes, a suicide was their best answer to this mystery, and according to Paris authorities, the case as good as closed. But the answer as to why Mthethwa would take his life may not be in Paris, but over 5,000 miles away, back in South Africa. Because South African authorities have also been doing their fair share of digging to find what could have led to the death of one of the country's most patriotic diplomats. The first place the police looked to for answers was the residency of Nathi Mthethwa, and they found something that they didn't think they would stumble across. And the craziest part is that it gives them a clue about the circumstances that led to the ambassador's demise. His home was fitted with many features that were obviously too expensive for him to afford given his pay grade. Within his home, they found security systems with fortified doors with hundreds of thousands of US dollars. This was the first time that authorities had come close enough to his house in KwaZulu-Natal to notice such details that had not been noticed before. But here's the problem. Authorities were actually aware that Nathi Mthethwa had assets that were too expensive for him to be in possession of. Back in 2011, Mthethwa's private security wall at his home in KwaZulu-Natal was allegedly paid for using the SAPS's Secret Service account. That's the Crime Intelligence Slush Fund. The alleged cost? 4 million rand. Now, why would rogue police agents spend a fortune on a minister's fence? Mkhwanazi argues they did it deliberately to compromise and control the minister. By making Mthethwa complicit, even unknowingly, he would be unable to challenge them, leaving the door wide open for them to loot millions from the fund unchecked. Mkhwanazi points out that this very big wall is still standing today, a physical monument to unaccountability. But here's the kicker. An earlier 2012 probe by the Auditor General did confirm the 4 million rand payment from the secret account, but cleared Mthethwa of impropriety, finding no proof that he knew where the money came from. Mthethwa himself welcomed those findings, stating he was vindicated. However, Mkhwanazi says the wall was just the start of the corruption. He detailed what he called the worst political interference he'd ever seen. While serving as acting National Police Commissioner in 2012, Mkhwanazi claims Mthethwa summoned him and outright demanded that he stop the prosecution and disciplinary case against then Crime Intelligence head, Lieutenant General Richard Madluli. Mkhwanazi says he refused, telling the minister, "You are wrong, I'm not going to do that." So this wasn't just about a wall. It was about weaponizing a secret fund to buy silence and interfere with justice. Mkhwanazi's testimony not only links Mthethwa to a massive abuse of state resources, but shows the chilling tactics used by powerful individuals to keep the corruption wheel spinning. But here's the thing about Nathi Mthethwa. His story of putting his interest and that of his allies above the nation he is meant to be serving runs deeper than political favors and overpriced furniture. As police minister, Mthethwa oversaw one of the darkest moments in post-apartheid history, the Marikana massacre of 2012, when police down 34 striking minors. Years later, as Minister of Arts and Culture, he became infamous for cronyism and waste. And then, almost quietly, he was shipped off to Paris in 2023 as South Africa's ambassador, what many called a velvet exile. It was basically the ANC's way of removing a political headache without making a scene. But then came the shocking twist. Mthethwa's sudden in France. Officials say he forced open a hotel window with scissors, left a note to his wife, and jumped. No struggle, no foul play, just a clean, tidy story. Too tidy, some say, because in South Africa's political world, neatness often hides the mess. Mthethwa wasn't just any diplomat. He was once one of Jacob Zuma's closest allies, and his name had surfaced in some of the most explosive corruption inquiries in modern South African history. The Zondo Commission heard how police slush funds, secret crime intelligence money, were allegedly used to buy luxury cars and cover personal expenses. One whistleblower even testified that a Mercedes-Benz ML350 bought with secret funds was ordered for Mthethwa himself. When journalists started asking questions, the car mysteriously disappeared, and it didn't stop there. Former police chiefs accused him of interfering in investigations, allegedly trying to protect powerful allies like Richard Madluli, the ex-crime intelligence boss, later charged with corruption. So when someone like that suddenly dies abroad under suspiciously neat circumstances, it raises eyebrows, especially when the government's response feels more like damage control than genuine transparency. Because this isn't new for the ANC, it's the same pattern: deny, distract, protect the powerful. From Zuma's state capture years to the scandals at Eskom and Transnet, the party's first instinct is always survival, not truth. Across history, authoritarian regimes have done the same. In the Soviet Union, Chile, and Zimbabwe, when an official became inconvenient, they were sent abroad, silenced, or written out of the story. And while South Africa isn't there yet, the resemblance is hard to ignore. But this discovery is just the beginning of things. This revelation would most likely lead authorities to search other properties Nathi Mthethwa might have had, and there's a high chance that they might discover assets that the late diplomat might be hiding. But even if it's discovered that Nathi Mthethwa illegally acquired those assets, he's not alive to answer for his crime. But the bigger picture doesn't just have Mthethwa in it. If it can be proven that Mthethwa was engaging in illegal activities, it might prompt Cyril Ramaphosa to carry out a witch hunt on South African politicians who might have quite the dirt on them. And considering the feud that Ramaphosa has with Jacob Zuma and officials loyal to him, this would be the perfect excuse for him to put them behind bars and out of the nation's political scene. These are long-term ripple effects that might not start being experienced till next year. For now, Mthethwa's family and his nation are mourning his remains have returned to his native country, and his funeral will be taking place on the 12th of October. The funeral ceremony is set to be a Category 2 ceremony, one only reserved for the most high-ranking of South Africa's leaders. If Mthethwa possibly took his life out of what was awaiting him, if his shady dealings were brought to life, remains a mystery. What are your thoughts on the whole situation? Do you think this police discovery brings the case closer to the actual truth? And how will South Africa's political landscape change after this shocking finding? We'd like to know your thoughts in the comments section. And don't forget to subscribe to this channel and have notifications turned on so you don't miss out on any detail about this case.